So my name is Captain Judy McClellan. Um, so I grew up in Banff, Canmore, 878. Was there for quite a few years. I did glider in 2003, power in 2004, and then I became a gliding instructor in 2006. And I currently have two little girls whose names are aviation themed. My youngest, her middle name is Scout, and the oldest, her middle name is CL. So that's just a fun little tidbit about me. Um, so just for cadets, you guys can choose to turn on your cameras if you want. You don't have to, but please make sure you keep your microphones off unless you're asking or answering a question. And that just goes for all of the classes that we're going to be doing in the National Cadet Ground School program. There can sometimes be lots of cadets logged in at the same time. So we just want to make sure that everybody can find what they need. And to do that. So also just be courteous and polite to other people. There's lots of instructors doing lots of different teachings. So just make sure you're kind to everyone. At any point, if you have a question, please just write along the top. There's a raise your hand button. So if you guys can do that, that's an easy way for the instructor to sort of see who has questions, whatnot. So for everybody, the instructors will be in uniforms. Again, this is still just something that we're doing for our program. Cadets do not need to be in uniform. If you guys are doing this at your local unit or somewhere that you are wearing a uniform, that's absolutely fine. But again, you don't have to have your screens on either. So that's not something that we'll necessarily see. Before we get into kind of the next part of this, the National Ground School program is brand new. So there's been a team of us working on it for the last about month and a half, trying to roll it out. So we know that there's going to be some glitches and some hiccups. We're trying to work on a little bit of a better way of getting feedback from everybody so that we can make sure we answer your questions and that we make it the best program that is available for you yeah, to learn from. Yeah, so during this class, just raise your hand. You can submit questions either through the forms or in the chat. Depending on how many cadets are in the chat, I may not see it or the instructors may not see it as quickly. And just that way we can try to answer any questions that are pertinent sooner rather than later. We've also created another, see if I can find it for you here, another team or another channel, I guess. And it's just called Air Cadet Flying Program, so ACFP. That's going to be more of just a general chat. If people have questions about what is gliding or, you know, did somebody go on power and really enjoy it or anything like that. So we're just going to try to keep as much of we're calling it the pilot chit chat or the aviation chit chat area so we can keep the majority of our that type of questions, just so that the forum for each class is kind of kept a little bit tidy. Because I think I went through this morning and I had to delete about 2,000 messages of people saying hi or hello or what is gliding, which is really wonderful. We obviously love to share that with everyone, but it does make it a little bit difficult to find questions about the class that's coming up. If you can imagine all like 1,500 cadets that are logging in tonight are all even just saying hello, it fills up pretty fast. Yeah, so down here, the AFCP, that's what I was talking about, the ACFP pilot channel. So you'll be able to find that in Teams under channels as well. And that's the best place to ask kind of whatever you want to know about flying that isn't related specifically to a class we're working on right now. Anybody have any questions before I move on a little bit? All right, so this is some of the things that the other instructors and I have pulled out of the questions that cadets have been asking. So you can attend any class you want at any time. Each week from Sunday, so classes start Sundays and they go till that following Saturday, it'll be the same classes that are covered. So this week, I believe it's 401, and 1 and 2 and lesson 3. So it will all be the same this week. There are classes available in French and English, and the classes will be recorded in an area called files. So the idea behind this is that hopefully everybody will find a time that they can come to a live class. If you can't for whatever reason, you're more than welcome to watch one of the recordings. The instructors will all be recording. And then that way you guys can look back on it, or maybe there's a topic you weren't quite sure about. You can definitely come back to that and watch it 1,000 times if you want. The only cadets who can attend the live sessions are people who would be eligible to go on gliding or power this summer, just because we don't need to have every level 1 cadet asking us what is a wing while we're trying to teach a class. We only have so many hours to teach in each week. Classes will be from November 3rd, that's when they started a couple days ago, and they'll go to December 21st. And then we'll have a little break for Christmas, and they'll resume again January 5th. Until the 31st. And you don't have to attend the classes. We would recommend it. There's been a lot of work that's been put into the classes, but you will by no means not be eligible to write the exams and apply for gliding and power if you haven't attended the classes. Maybe you're somebody who studies and learns really well on your own and would rather do it, on your own time. And that's totally fine too, but these are the resources that we have created to hopefully allow every cadet who wants to apply to be successful. Any questions about that? I know I got a lot of questions before about like, is there attendance, or if I go to half of one class or anything like that. No, everybody's good, it sounds like. Okay, we'll carry on. Okay, so there's also, I think, been a little bit of confusion about the NGSP SharePoint. So if you go, let's see if it's in here. If you go to the national page, so this is where you like log into Cadet 365. Up here in our right corner is the National Ground School Program. If you click on that, it will bring us to here, which is where it was before, where everybody could apply, figure out what to do, and click here, and that will allow you to get into any of the SharePoints that you want. So tonight is in the Northwest class, but there's also one happening in Central right now. There's one happening in Eastern. So those are just ways that you can most easily navigate. You can also star them as favorites and save them too, so it makes it easier for you to get to afterwards. The feeds, like I said, we're still trying to work this whole thing out and still trying to upload and get everything sorted. So we are working on, and we're working on making more and more things available. So the new feed section, so the feed just where I kind of showed you guys, we will go through there. You should be able to see, yeah, so if you go into the National Ground School Program, you'll be able to see everything that you need. So this one's in French, but yeah, so there's just a lot more in the SharePoint. So right now we're still uploading classes, so you won't be able to access all of them yet. Right now, everything that we have is, once it's being uploaded, it's being converted to blue. So make sure when you're going in to look at the classes, if you're going to, click on a PowerPoint and whatever's in there, most of them say 40101 EN. EN stands for English. And then if it's 40101 FR, that stands for French. So in each of these folders, you'll find quizzes that we're working on creating. The PowerPoints, I think, will be available after the week that they've been created. And there'll be student note sheets, so you can use them when you're taking notes from the PowerPoints. You can use them for other things, just to, yeah, I guess like share knowledge, study from it. So there will be a lot more things in there as well. And again, it is still evolving. So right now, most of what we just have is in 401 because we had to write all of the material and then translate it all to French and then translate it back to make sure everything made sense. So it's a bit of a learning process for everybody. So then, yeah, when you go into, so this is like if you clicked on PO 401 and went into it, so you'd see that there's an airlaw topic list, a lesson plan, and then the same two things in French. So right now the topic list, here's the topic list. So We created these basically as like a header from each of the ground school classes that you're going to take. So even if you're not really interested in attending every class, this is a really great study guide that you can take and use because it has all of the major bullet points that we're going to be using um, for teaching each topic. So it's all broken down by by E or PO and EO. So there's lots of information in there, and those we're still working on too. So you'll notice that every week, if you log on, there'll be more and more stuff kind of added. And we're also just trying to make it a little bit easier to navigate as we kind of get through all of that. Anybody have any questions? I know it's clear as mud. Okay, well, we can once I'm done, I've only got a few more slides left. We can kind of open it up a bit more for just some questions if people are thinking of things that are coming up too. Okay, so if we go on to, you guys should probably all be able to see this right now on the left side of your screen. It probably says like home, cyber, activity, teams. So if you actually click on teams and go into that, you'll see all of these are populated for you. So every single cadet who is joining the ground school program is registered in all of the regions. And that's just to allow you to have more freedom with, the timings that you're available, different things like that. Um, there's lots of different times and stuff that work for different people. So any of those teams, you can go into them and you should be able to access, yeah, so Air Cadet Flying Pilots, RCSU Atlantic, Central, they're all going to look basically the same when you get inside of them. They'll just be sort of like different questions. The classes will just be at different times, that sort of thing. But otherwise, they should be pretty much the same because it's all the same information that's being covered, no matter where you're going through. And then, yeah, so in teams, so this is just Pacific. There's a lot of things in many that are bilingual. So you're going to get region specific posts. And then under files, you'll find recordings for the classes for that specific RCSU, because each of the RCSUs is running their own classes. So there'll be, if you really don't like some instructor, how they talk or something like that, you'll be able to watch that same slide for somebody else. In there, you'll go and you'll be able to find calendars. Calendars now, I think all the regions, we updated it this afternoon, have a full schedule of what time the classes are and where they are, and you can look at that. And we've converted them all to so you have them for your region's time. So if you live in Manitoba and you're on Central Time right now, that's great. And if you live in Vancouver and you're on Pacific Time, all of those timings should make it a little bit less complicated to find what you need to watch and do. And then there's just going to be the NGSP training resources. So linked it, it'll just have a link to all of our training resources within the NGSP. So there's 4 of us, I guess, on the team that are, I guess, managing most of this. Under the NCA OPSO. So we will be the ones kind of cleaning it up, changing things, trying to figure out how to help you guys more. Like we've said, it's a new program. We're trying really hard to make it good and better than we've had in the past couple of years. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We're very open to feedback. Just make sure that it's nice and polite. You can either do it in the chat, like I said, or there should be a form I just can't find right now. I'll have to look for that and I'll make sure that that gets posted up there. Okay, does anybody have any questions? Does that make a lot more sense to people from, I know there's been a lot of like questions and stuff about what's been going on in the last little bit, but yeah, if there are questions and if you can't think of them right now, that's totally fine too. And I'll just see if I can pull up a couple more things. Yeah, so this is just, can everybody still see my screen? It's kind of a new one now. Yeah, we've got a question. Cadet Cook, sorry. Yeah, so there's just a few different things that are kind of going on, and I'll see if I can share this for you a little better. Okay, is everybody still good with seeing my screen? Or even just one person tell me I'm good? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so this is just in the Cadet Digital Campus. So the National Ground School program. The communications board is going to come soon. And like I said, we're just still trying to update all of it. We're just kind of working on that. And then right below here is going to be where all the resources are. So if you click on some of them right now, it'll open and you'll
I
see
think we're
that
still just looking at your presentation.
oh, you're not.
I think we're still
Okay,
just looking at your
that's weird.
presentation there.
Well, that's not helpful to anyone. Let's see if I can change that. I don't know if it's gonna let me. Yeah, it might not. I might just have to go through some of these. Okay, apologies for that. So, yeah, here, clicking in here, this is going to get you to where all of the information that you need is. And while I try to see if I can share my other screen. All right, does anybody have any questions while I try to figure this part out? Or is there's quite a few of you here, so it seems like most of you have maybe figured out how to at least get into the meetings. So that's kind of the good part. And yeah, I mean, that really is the bulk of everything that's going to be on here for now. And, you know, like I said, it's going to get better for all of these SharePoints. If you click on any of them, the ones that have the blue file folder are the ones that are fully updated. So that's something that's really important to follow because the yellow ones don't have the info put into them yet. So it just means that we're still kind of working on it, still plugging away, trying to make sure that everything is sorted out there. And yeah, if as things go on, what have I done now? We can definitely make it, yeah, we can try to make it better. We can try to, yeah, just make it more comprehensive. So the first question that I think I got is, will we have a calendar that shows classes for all time zones? The answer is yes. So you're just gonna have to, you're just gonna have to click into each region to be able to access it. So if you go into the teams and then click on, say, I'm gonna do Northwest. Can I post a link to the SharePoint? Yes, I can, absolutely. So right now there is a list of classes. So if anybody wants to look in the chat, I've just posted a list of the classes for you. So there's one. Can everybody see the pictures of the time zones that I posted? So there should be two little files that I just dropped in the chat. Good, Kate. And so that will allow you, yeah, like a little bit more, I guess, like ability to maybe look at it. We realized earlier today that they were only written in, I think, Central Time. So there was a few people who had some difficulties, including myself, making sure that I was in the right time zone. So this is another big question, and I'll just grab one other document for you guys and drop it in the chat too. So somebody has asked, do we have the same classes lessons for Power Pilot and Glider? So the answer is yes. For this year, we're only going to be writing one exam. It will be 50 questions for everybody. And yeah, so part of that is just, it's the evolution of creating a new program. So when somebody goes on power, the biggest thing that you're just going to have to learn at that point is engines. And it's something that we've learned in, for a long time. So that's just going to be the one part that we unfortunately do not think that we will have time this year to touch on. Sorry, I'm just trying to pull up one other file for you guys here, which will hopefully answer a few more questions. Sorry, I have way too many files open and I'm just trying to find one, which of course is being difficult to find. Okay, so I'm just going to see if I can copy all of this. Okay, so I should be able to save. Okay, so there's a Word document for you that kind of goes over some of the classroom facts. So I guess this one, we have it in both English and French in the same document. So that just kind of makes it easy. So I hope that this will really help to answer some of the questions, right? So is there a meeting right now? If so, I will be on in a bit. Yes, there's a meeting right now. So if you don't make this whole meeting, then you can absolutely come to a later one. And then, yeah, like we said, please try to only ask questions in the team chats that are related to what we're doing right now, as opposed to just introduction, things like that. So we're going to continue on making quizzes, worksheets, PowerPoints. You can follow along with a lot of the questions that we're going to put in the mini quizzes for each chapter will be very similar to what you can expect to see on the entrance exam. Like I already said, there's a detailed topic list for this class. It's a great study resource. The other thing is, if you guys are studying on your own, not attending as much of the classes, bear in mind that not all information on the internet is good. So make sure you're using a credible resource, the notes from here, the FTGU, something like that. So this ground school, like I kind of was explaining before, is brand new this year, right? So it's being taught exclusively by people within our program. So people who are generally pretty familiar with gliding and power, knowing how to study. The majority of us are gliding instructors or scout pilots or both. And that's just something that we're hoping that we'll be able to do it within our program this year. No difference between gliding and power for the entrance exam, like I mentioned. And then attendance is tracked, but it's not specific. So we're trying to say like, oh, you didn't come to a class, you're not eligible or anything. It's just also for us to see how many people we registered, how many are actually taking classes. And that way we can kind of go from there and try to make the program better as we go on. Can we follow along with an FTGU? Yes, quite a lot of the information that we have has been resourced from the FTGU from many, many people's years of teaching ground school, either at summer camp or at the units. Some places do have references to specific areas of the FTGU, but unfortunately, we can't take all of the info from that because then we'd have to pay for it. Rather than just having our own knowledge. So some places there might not be specific references, and that is the reason why. Okay, I think that's kind of most of what I can kind of go over now is just sort of a general introduction.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much to Captain McLeod for getting us started here. We'll start off with three air law lessons to do tonight as the first class of the 10-week session. So I'm Captain Joseph Auger, and I'll be teaching 401.01 Intro to Air Law. Just a little bit about myself. So I was a cadet at 706 Ottawa Snowy Owl Squadron. It's actually in Eastern Region. I did glider in 2015. I did power in 2016. Then as an officer, I became a glider instructor in 2018 and a tow pilot in 2023. Same rules as the class here. So I will keep the meeting open. I'll keep the chat open over here on my other screen, so I'll be able to see any comments that you make and any questions that you may have. I'll be able to answer that as best as I can. If you put your hand up, that's the best way to notify me that you have a question, or just write it into the chat there. Feel free to put your camera on if you like, or keep it off. Does not matter to me. Just keep your mic off unless you have a question there. All right, a couple of things that we'll be teaching today. We've got 5 teaching points there. We'll talk about the CARs, which are not related to automobiles, the Canadian Aviation Regulations. We'll talk about the TC-AIM, the Aeronautical Information Manual. Talk about the Canada Flight Supplements, the Transport Safety Board, and NAV Canada Services. Oh, thank you, Captain Clan, for answering that the question there. All right. So we'll start out here. In Canada, Canada is of course a democracy. Within democracy, we have Parliament. Parliament passes acts which could become into law. And in Canada, the Aeronautics Act is the big overarching law that governs aviation in Canada. It's the legal document that governs all of the laws related to flying in Canada. It's a very important document, of course, because this is what lets us do what we love to do. This empowers the Canadian Aviation Regulations, which is delegated to Transport Canada, the regulatory agent, the government agency that controls aviation in Canada. So we'll start out with the cars here. The Canadian Aviation Regulations, very complicated document, very, very detailed in what it does. It's essentially the rules in what you can and cannot do. The cool thing is, for all of these various different things, we can actually find them online. So anything that we talk about today, you can actually look it up and find that information on the internet. You can search the Canada Aviation Regulations, for instance, and you'll be able to see exactly that document right here, 96-433. It's on the Transport Canada. It's on the Justice website, and that's where it will go over the all the different rules that we'll be talking about today. It's divided up into 2 subcomponents, either regulatory texts or standards, which we'll go into in a little bit there. Here's a screenshot of the Justice, the Canada Justice website, where it will show the those documents there. You'll see that whenever we're looking at a regulatory document, when we're looking at a rule, that rule is going to be succeeded with a 0. So the second digit is going to be a 0. So for instance, the recent issue requirement is under the Canada Air Regulation 401.05, Canadian Aviation Regulation there. We'll also see, contrary to that, are standards. So this is where they're going to elaborate, they're going to expand on that rule, and they're going to give a lot more detail to why it is the way that it is, or exactly how you're supposed to follow that rule. And we'll show some examples in just a second of why that is the way that it is. You'll see often or all the time in standards, the second digit is going to be a 2. So for instance, the standard that relates to recency requirements can be found under 421.05. It's recommended to read both the regulation and the standard together. So we can do a demonstration of that here. Say, for instance, that we go into part 6 of the cars. You'll notice that in part 6, we've got the airspace. So the rules governing the airspace will be located under 601. But then you'll see a standard that could relate to that in 621 over here. You see it as it relates through for all of the different regulations there. One of the ones you'll see quite commonly in your gliding, your power training is 401, which are the rules that govern the flight crew permits, licenses, and ratings. And then they've got a standard that talks about exactly the same thing here. So, for instance, we can open up one of the regulations, one of the laws as it relates to that. You'll see it bounces us to the Justice website here. If we go into this site here, you'll see 400.01 is doing a whole bunch of definitions as it relates to it. And then after that, 401 is going to start talking about these laws. We can pull a law just at random here. So, for instance, the Canadian Aviation 401.03, it's talking about how nobody can act as a flight crew member. Nobody can exercise the privileges of a license, a rating, a permit, unless you hold these certain things. And you say, well, how do I hold those things? How do I do that? Well, you'd look at the standard that relates to it. So, for instance, this is the standard on exactly what we just looked at, the flight crew permits, licenses, and ratings. And it'll show you in here, for instance, for a private pilot license, the standard is 421.26. It'll talk about exactly how you're supposed to obtain that license. You need to have done your ground school, you need to have this experience in the airplane, you need to have done a flight test, etc., etc. So it goes to a decent amount of detail about exactly that. Can I slow down a bit? Sure thing. Obviously, I get very excited when talking about airlaw. Oh, to review what we talked about there, the two different things, the two different, I should say, two different documents or two different ways to read the cars. You'll look at the laws as it relates to whatever you're interested in learning. That's going to be under the regulatory text. That's going to be 401 or 601, 701, something along those lines. And that's going to be found on the Justice Canada website, as you can see from here. We've also, within the cars, we've got the standards. And the standards is where it's going to elaborate and expand on that text. These are found on Transport Canada's website. The second digit is the number 2, for instance, 421.05. And it's recommended, of course, to read the two of them together. Good to continue. It only gets more exciting from here. All right. Casey Brown says yes. So now we'll get into these subsections of the cars. There's 10 of them. And this is it's good to have a general understanding of this, but it's in no means necessary to have any of this memorized. It's one of the things. If you're going towards a commercial license, you're going to need to have a lot more of this understanding memorized. But until that point, we're relatively good with just the overview knowledge. So, for instance, you'll see it's divided up into, I think, 9 parts, as you can see from here. Some of the ones that we'll find ourselves in more often than not. You'll see part 4 is the personnel licensing and training. So, flight training units that are going to exist in part 4. You'll find all of the general operating, the flight rules, the can I do that in the air? Is that a thing that they're going to let me do? You're going to find that in your part 6. If you move on and you get yourself a commercial license, you're going to find a lot of that information in Part 7, the commercial air services, the 4 different types of commercial operators that are allowed to operate in Canada, for instance, various different information like that. The rule that says how close you're allowed to have your runway lights and what color your runway lights need to be. Well, you're probably going to find that in Part 3, where it talks about aerodromes, airports, and heliports. And how you're supposed to maintain an airplane, well, probably you're going to find that in part 5, the airworthiness that governs maintenance standards and whatnot of airplanes. Now, Transport Canada, believe it or not, realizes that reading through laws is not something that a lot of people like to do on their free time. I know it's not for me, and I have a job in it. So what they do is they produce the Aeronautical Information Manual. This thing is great. This thing will break down all sorts of different regulations, rules, and best practices. and they'll put it in guide form where you can go through and you can read about how to apply that law. Once again, a free document that you can find online. I just type in TC AIM into Google, and I'm able to pull up my Transport Canada Aeronautical Information Manual. They publish it twice a year, so make sure that you get the most up-to-date document. But it's great. You can download the PDF right there. Just for simplicity, we'll go into, you see the various different sections here. We'll go into the rules of the air and the air traffic services, for instance. So oftentimes this will reference a law. It'll reference a car that you want to look for, but it will give a lot more explanation into that. So say, for instance, maybe somebody has their mic on unintentionally. Okay. Say, for instance, we want to go in and have a look at the contents of a flight plan and a flight itinerary, for instance. So in here, it will detail all of that. It'll talk in plain English. It'll talk in a readable way about all of those different elements that you have for there. If it's relevant, they'll reference the law that that section goes towards, and it's a very good way to do that. People will use this sort of like a glossary. So if there's a term that you're like, I'm not 100% sure how I'm supposed to apply that law or whatnot, people will go into the AIM and they'll find out what it meant basically. They have some glider stuff in here. What they'll do, they'll put this blue color over the new stuff, and in the most recent AIM, they actually put in a section on gliders. So you'll see right here, glider circuits typically have entry points approximately opposite the upwind end of the runway. Gliders operate on the downwind leg between these altitudes. And then you'll see later on it talks about, well, in accordance with this law, this is the way that that this is applied. So it's much easier to read the AIM than it is to read the law. However, if you need a black and white answer of can I do this, that's where you're going to find it in the cards. This, once again, it's a guide. That's the TC AIM. What did I miss? Found online. We saw it was online on the TC website. We saw the details about air law, including all those things. Talked about that. Yes, operative words. They will use various different words in Transport Canada regulations, and the use of these two words is very, very important. If it says should, they're informing you that it is a good idea to do that. Transport Canada officially recommends that you go ahead and you do that. If it says shall, that means that is a mandatory procedure that is supported by the law. You shall do that. You shall not pass. We have the Canada Flight Supplement, another great manual for us here. This is actually a joint military and civilian document. It's done by NAV Canada. For those of you who don't know, NAV Canada, I want to say 1996, sometime around then, split from Transport Canada. It's now a not-for-profit organization that runs the air traffic control and the air traffic services in Canada. They're known to be a world leader in the sphere. They're making huge technological advancements from there. This document is published a lot more frequently. It's published every 56 days. It's got various different subsections within it. We'll go over well, the most important one is subsection B here, which is the aerodrome directory, and I'll show you a little demo on that. I know I had one question in the chat before we do that. Let me have a look. Yeah, should. Should is an encouragement. Shall is a must. Shall is a law. The CFS, you technically have to pay for it through NavCan, but you can go to various different websites like Garmin's flightplan.com. I'll put a link for that in the chat. You can click on this FBO and airport info at the bottom, so you don't even need to make an account for that. And you can look up the various different airports. Would somebody give me a Canadian airport? Please and thank you.
YYC.
YYC? Let's go to Calgary. Calgary International, if you scroll down, they've got a button here. The way that Garmin lays it out, they've got a button for the Canada Flight Supplement. So this will actually take you to the section in the Canada Flight Supplement with the CFS entry for that airport. So this is Calgary International Airport in Alberta. They always do a layout of the airport, be it a full page, because Calgary is obviously a more complex airport than some, or it'll just be a little picture in the corner. It's got tons of information that's written almost in code. Now, don't worry, in the CFS itself, there's a legend that talks about what every single one of these sections are. And typically, when you're going to fly into a place, you'll skim over it, and a lot of it won't apply. But the stuff that does apply is important. I'll highlight some of those things. For instance, landing fees is probably a good one to know if you're going to fly into somewhere to make sure that you bring your wallet with you. But more importantly, they'll talk about the services that are available. So, for instance, if you know that your airplane takes 100 low lead fuel, and you know that when you get to Calgary, you're going to want to take 100 low lead fuel, it's probably a good thing to check the CFS to make sure it's there. If you need to know like where to park, it'll tell you the FBOs that are available there, the fixed base operators. Every runway that exists, it will tell you, for instance, the length, the width, the surface that it's the surface material, like what the runway is made out of. I'll tell you the exact direction of that runway with its name, all various different information on that. The taxiways and the weights that they're certified for, and various different information on that. The runway lighting, the taxiway lighting, the frequencies that you need to contact when you're there, the radio navigation, and they'll also probably the more important, I should say most important, is the procedures section where they'll talk about exactly what they want you to do when you go into it. So of course, Calgary is a very complicated one. It's got a 4-page long CFS entry. Does anyone have a smaller airport? Just to give one more example of what like a smaller airport would show. Oh, there's lots in the chat. I quite like CJF5 because I've never heard of it before. CJF5, maybe it was mistyped. It doesn't look like it shows anything. We'll do CYKM. Just picking at random. For Kincardine in Ontario. Works. Kincardine, there you go. So this is what a smaller airport would look like. You'll see it still has those procedures, still has comms, still has lighting. All the different sections are still there for it, and it still has that little aerodrome map for you. You'll see that we'll be able to find our fuel, and it'll show you that there is one special procedure for this airport, which is that we have right-hand circuits if you're flying on runway 31, and that is in accordance with the Canadian Aviation Regulation number 602.96. So I've left the link in the chat. Feel free to have a look at any of those airports or aerodromes. Just keep in mind in the CFS, it's not just airports that can make an entry, it's any registered aerodrome. You'll see one for the big airports, you'll see one for the small aerodromes as well. CFS is great. I love looking at the CFS. Ah, there's an example of Saint Jean. All right. Moving away a little bit from regulatory documents, we have a regulatory, or we have the Transportation Safety Board, the TSB. The TSB is it's fantastic. This is established under the Canadian Transportation Accident Investigation and Safety Board Act. You'll find every established, developed country in the world, they have some similar organization like the Transport Safety Board. The TSB, they're responsible for investigating all transport occurrences in Canada, including if it's a Canadian or a non-Canadian registered aircraft. They will do accident investigation. They're not a regulatory agency, so they don't make the laws. What they will do is they will recommend to Transport Canada the changes in aviation that need to be made to ensure safety. There's investigators, they're on 24-hour standby call. So in the case that there's an accident at any time, day or night, they'll do the investigation. And if you've ever watched, by the way, the Mayday show on Discovery, if you've seen a Mayday episode involving a Canadian aircraft, Canadian crew, or in Canada, you would have seen that the TSB would have gotten dispatched to it. Their objective is to prevent further occurrences. So if there's something to be learned, they will ensure that they learn it, be it a mechanical failure, be it like pilot error, or anything like that. And while they don't assign blame, they're not looking for information to see who who's at fault, whose fault was it. They're looking to make sure that in the future that would never happen again. So they will recommend systems, procedures, and whatnot to make sure that in the future that's not going to happen. Within the military and within the cadet organization, we actually fall under the military version of this, which is the Directorate of Flight Safety, DFS, based in Ottawa. But at each of the like for instance on the glider course, each wing there's a detachment for this, and at each cadet training center, you're going to have a delegate, a unit flight safety officer, who will be your point of contact for flight safety matters. All right. Any questions so far? I like to ramble. I like to talk about laws. What can I say? Good, good. Our final teaching point for this lesson is NAV Canada services. So NAV Canada is responsible for providing flight planning and air traffic control services in Canada. And NAV Canada, they are great. If by the end of this, if you've fallen in love with NavCan, then I've done my job. Some of the things that they do, they will offer area control centers. So in Canada, go back to the web here. Go Nav Canada ACC map, for instance. Canada's divided up into 7. There's 7 different area control centers that will control traffic across Canada. This is not only for overflights, so for airplanes that are they're transiting Canadian airspace and flying overhead to provide air traffic control, separation, efficiency for them. It's also for it's not quite the right map. It is to provide division within NAV Canada so that each region is represented more or less locally. Canada, of course, with such a vast aerospace extending all the way up into the north through the Edmonton Flight Information Region, all the way out west Vancouver, and all the way out east, including the transatlantic flights, where the transatlantic flights both coming from and going to Europe are controlled within the Gander Oceanic region. NAV Canada has a large responsibility for air travel in the Northern Hemisphere. They also are the ones who provide the towers. So at the busier airports, as deemed by NavCan, they will provide towers which control the airspace. Believe it or not, in Canada, most airports, most aerodromes are actually uncontrolled. Pilots will announce their intentions and are expected to self-deconflict from one another. However, in busier airports, NavCan has the responsibility to both provide safe air traffic control, so they're going to be separating airplanes and making sure that they don't trade paint, and also to provide an efficient flow of traffic through those busier airports. So most of the airports that you would have flown in and out of, most of the airports with international at the end of their name have some form of air traffic control tower there. At the little bit less busy airports, they'll have a flight service station. So these aren't controllers; they are they're FSS agents. They are going to be providing advisory services. So while they're not controlling the airplanes, they're going to be providing advisory services such as, well, there's another airplane over here, or here's the weather, here's the winds, here's what the runway condition is, and they'll provide some instrument flying advisory services to other pilots as well. There's a flight information center as well. The airlines, they pay an awful lot of money to have dispatchers. Those dispatchers will be advising the captains on the weather, on the routing, and on everything to do with that flight. But you and I, in our little gliders, in our little Cessna 172s, for instance, we don't have the luxury of paying for a dispatcher to be at our disposal. But luckily, NAV Canada has that service for us. Through the flight information centers, the FIX, of which there are, I believe, 6 across Canada now. They're just a phone call away. So you can call them up and say, hey, in about an hour, I'm going to do a flight from here to here. They'll give you all the information that you want to know. They'll tell you the significant weather, the winds, the cloud heights, all the different information that you can. And they are a huge part of aviation safety in Canada. Believe it or not, in the States, it exists. It's a private contractor. It's Leidos, it's called, the company. And from what I've heard, people don't use them nearly as much as they do in Canada. Canada's a huge, vast country with very different weather from one spot to another. Calling the FIC, getting a good weather briefing from them, they are fantastic for that. One of the biggest things that they do, which I haven't even talked about yet, they are responsible for emergency notification in Canada. So within Canada, we have the Joint Rescue Command Centers. There's three of them across the country. In the case that an airplane goes missing or whatnot, they're responsible for manning the search and rescue efforts. Well, how do they find out? How does search and rescue find out that there is somebody to go and look for? Well, it's because you or I, as pilots, will file a flight plan with the Flight Information Center, with the FIC, with NAVCAN, and we'll tell them all sorts of information on when we're going to be there and whatnot, what our route is. In the case that you or I don't call to tell them yes, we made it okay, or no, we didn't go on the flight or whatever, then they're the ones who are responsible for calling your emergency contact and then calling the search and rescue to make sure that they get there. I had an example of somebody who filed a flight plan, which I'll show you in a second here. Nav Canada flight plan. They filed the flight plan, they did the flight, they landed properly, and then their phone was out of battery, and they completely forgot to notify NavCan that they had gotten there. So NavCan, they first try to call the pilot if you're overdue, and they'll try and call you to see if you just forgot to file the plan. Of course, that didn't work. Phone was dead. Tried to call the emergency contact. Emergency contact didn't pick up the phone. So then, this is 45, 50, 55 minutes after that flight came overdue. Navcan, the fix, they start to look on like radar tracks to see if they can see, well, did you kind of make it close? Did that pilot get close-ish to their destination? Reached a point where they had search and rescue on the line on standby. They picked up the other phone and they'd called the airport manager at the airport that they had landed at. And they said, "We're about to send search and rescue. Can you look out your window and see if that plane had arrived?" And thankfully, of course, it did, and they called off the search and rescue. But yeah, close your flight plans is the moral of that story. Um, Back in the day, you used to file this by fax. Nowadays, if you don't phone it in, if you don't ask the FIC to do your flight plan for you, instead, what a lot of people will do is they'll do it through the website. You can even get apps on your iPad to file a flight plan for you. It's super easy that way. But you can have a look on this form. So there's various different informations. Um, You'll see it will show, for instance, the aircraft identification, the flight rules you're filing under, how many aircraft are within it, the type of aircraft, the route, the speed, the altitude, the estimated time, what survival equipment you have, what emergency radio you have, how many people on board, how much fuel you had on board, the pilot's name, the search and rescue on it, like tons of information, the colors of the airplane, everything. Very, very detailed. We'll get into more detail about that later on, I'm sure. But that's the big one for there. And up in the north, you'll see some community aerodrome radio stations where it's contracted services to provide air traffic control, or I shouldn't say air traffic control, to provide advisory services up in the north. So that's some confirmation questions for you. If you see the number 426.21, where would this part of the cars be found? Not all at once now. Telyatnikov.
This would be in the standard part of the cars.
100% right. It is a standard. Do you remember what part 4 of the cars is? What that relates to?
Personnel licensing and training.
That's it right. There you go. Somebody else. What does the term shall imply? Jaddy.
That's mandatory that you have to do it.
Absolutely. You must do it. What information can be found in the CFS? You need many correct answers for this one. There's lots of things you can find in the CFS. I'll pull up a CFS just to help. Well, Mr. Gallagher, You didn't raise your hand, but you did something just as good. Gallagher, what do you find in the CFS? Well, move on to Sunil Kumar.
Radio navigations and communication.
Totally, radio nav. This particular CFS I pull up, actually, this airport has no radio nav, so it's I'm not seeing any radio nav here, but totally communication. You see, this particular airport has an aerodrome traffic frequency. They have a Unicom. It's an approach Unicom that operates for limited hours on this particular frequency within this area. That's a good one. Do you know what the TSB does? Joel, you're 100% right. So the CFS will have services at airports, aerodromes. Yeah. Cadet Cook, I think you had your hand up. But in all fairness, he did lower his hand. Gallagher, you want to give it a shot?
Yeah, they investigate aviation accidents that occur in Canada. So
Absolutely. It doesn't even have to be an accident. It's an occurrence technically. So it could be like a near miss. So even if
Yeah.
nobody touches, but it's still reported, they'll investigate that. Yeah. There was a comment in the chat about that. They're responsible for all transport occurrences in Canada. You must be looking at the slides, but you're 100% right. And final question for this deck, what is an ACC? Oh, cool. We'll give it another try. Maybe Cook's mic doesn't work. I'm sure that Cook was going to say the same thing that Brinkers, Cameron, and Price said in the chat, which is Area Control Center. It's 100% right. Very good. That's our first deck. We're going to start it with 401.02, our next class of the evening. This is on terminology and ATC communications. Oftentimes, this is like one of the things I see people, I shouldn't say struggle on, but it's often like a block for people is ATC communications. It's really not that hard. You need to you need to be confident in what you do, of course, but the ATC they're there to help you. So as long as they have some of the basic knowledge that we're going to talk about today, we'll do just fine. Got a couple of points that we're going to go over today. We'll talk about terminology, talk about how to log flights, ATC clearances versus instructions. I'll talk about visual light signals. That's the contents of today's class. So we'll talk about terminology, the terms that help understand the law. We'll start out with the following three right here. Instrument flight rules. It's a lot of text, so I'll take some of it off. Two different, I guess, categories of flying in Canada, if you will. Two different subsets of rules that we follow. You can follow the instrument flight rules. Any airliner that you would have flown on, there's 99% chance that they're flying under the instrument flight rules. They're more technical, they're more procedural, but they allow you to fly in and above cloud, which, of course, for an airliner is necessary. Once we start talking about airspace, you'll see the certain class of airspace you must be flying the instrument flight rules to get there. Consequently, when you first get your license, you're going to be licensed under the visual flight rules, so you'll only be able to fly by means of visual reference to the ground. We'll see some definitions to this later, but in effect, you need to be able to see 50% or more of the ground in order to fly under visual flight rules. There's also the special visual flight rules. These are the rules for operating in weather conditions that are less than VFR within a control zone, where you could be granted to operate under the special visual flight rules. It's oftentimes you'll use the special visual flight rules in the case that you get stuck and the weather deteriorates below VFR, then you can request special VFR, for instance. And funny enough, air traffic control cannot actually give it to you. You have to ask, and then they have to give it, then they can accept it. Lots of definitions here. These are things if that you shouldn't have to think about too much. You should have a rough understanding of what they are. So if you don't know this just yet, these are good terms that you should know. Especially going into meteorology sections, these terms are going to be tossed around like candy. They're good ones to know. So the ceiling, for instance, that's the lowest height at which a broken or overcast condition exists, or the vertical visibility when you've got like snow, smoke, fog, something that's blocking that top. The ceiling in the visual flight rules is the highest that you can fly because you're not allowed to fly above the ceiling. If there's one cloud in the sky, it doesn't count. You talk about this more in meteorology classes, but it's a broken or an overcast condition. So more than 50% of the sky being covered, that's going to be your ceiling. Talk about visibility. This is a very technical definition. The ability as determined by atmospheric conditions, expressed in units of distance, whatnot. This is how far you're able to see in front. This is horizontal most of the time visibility. It's measured in two different ways, be it flight visibility, which is where the pilot will look in front and say, I can see about 2 miles in front of me. It's about 2 statute miles worth of visibility. Or on the ground, which is usually a bit more technical, and that's going to be contained in a weather observation that could be reported by air traffic control, the flight service station, or even an automated weather observation system. There, it's going to report the visibility in front. More of these definitions. So Transport Canada defines day and night. And that's because in Canada, when you first get your license, you're actually only licensed to fly in the day. Versus if you get your night rating, it's actually a separate process and you will be able to fly at night with a night rating. Gliders, for instance, cannot fly at night. By law. I'm sure technically they could, but I haven't tried it because it's illegal. So be careful, there's a white screen coming up, so you might be blinded. I'll show you first, and then once I've shown you, then we'll read the definition together. So this is kind of a top-down view of the Earth, if you will. Big circle like this. We'll put a line through it like this. This is kind of our horizon. So the sun, as it crests the horizon, this is where we're going to have our sun rise. As the sun rises higher up into the sky like this. Then the sun finally sets over here. That's the question. Is this day in Canada? Those of you who've done some meteorology classes will be able to say that no, that's actually not day in Canada. Day in Canada is not actually defined as sunrise to sunset. Day in Canada is defined a little bit differently. Day is from sunrise to sunset, but it's also the periods of civil twilight. So that's actually where the sun is a little bit below the horizon on either side. Does anyone know how much below? This is a very exaggerated drawing. Cook Commarise. Ari's Cook, you'll have to put in the chat. Your mic has just not been doing it today. Jadi, close, but Price, Oliver got you beat there. 6 degrees, actually. So it's where, per the definition, it's the center of the sun's disk is less than 6 degrees below the horizon here. So any time that the sun, this middle of the sun, is less than 6 degrees from the horizon, including all of the time when it's above the horizon, all the way down until where it's 6 degrees below the horizon again. That is considered day in Canada. Now, these periods here, the 6 degree periods here and here, these are called civil twilight. So in Canada, day is defined from the beginning of morning civil twilight all the way until the end of evening civil twilight. Now, most people will estimate this at being 30 minutes before the sun rises to 30 minutes after the sun sets. But technically speaking, that's not actually correct. And those of you who are here tonight are going to know that right here. TC, it is the time between the beginning of morning civil twilight until the end of evening civil twilight. There's actually a website that you can go to, the National Research Council. They will do a sunrise, sunset calculator, something like that. They will actually calculate this per location. Somebody give me a city in the chat. Edmonton. I like Edmonton. You can put this into their website here. We're going to calculate by civil twilight because, of course, we know as pilots that our day is defined as the start of civil twilight in the morning until the end of civil twilight in the evening. And the website doesn't work. We'll try one more time. There's other ways to find this information, but we can try like this. There we go, second time. Today is November 5th. Scroll our way all the way down to November 5th. And you'll see that they actually have it defined here. We'll scroll to the top so we know what we're looking at. So the civil twilight starts at 7:05 in the morning. So the earliest that you can take off as a day VFR pilot is 7:05 in the morning. And the latest that you can operate the airplane is 17:30 in the evening. The sun sets at 16:52, but roughly 30 minutes later at 17:30, that's the end of evening civil twilight. Civil twilight ends, so that's the latest that you can operate. You can definitely have this link. This is the National Research Council. I'll give you the generic link so it's not for just for Edmonton. I'll put that in the chat for you there. There's many different websites that will report on this. Technically speaking, in Canada, it's the National Research Council that have the official metric for exactly when that time starts and ends. But as you know, a rough approximation is 30 minutes before sunrise till 30 minutes after sunset. If you saw that on a test, on a multiple choice test, and it didn't have any answer talking about beginning of morning civil twilight till the end of evening civil twilight, that's close enough. But technically speaking, that's the definition right there, and that's how to calculate it. Oh, we spent a decent amount of time talking about day and night. Very good. Any questions? I don't know about you, but where I am right now, it's pitch black outside and has been for hours, so I'd be able to tell you we're at night right now. Okay, logging of flights. Pilots must log their time. If any of you know of pilots, the next question that you ask them after they say, "Oh, I'm a pilot," you go, "Oh, that's cool. How many hours do you have?" Because that's just what people like to know. It helps with getting a job. It helps in the air cadet program, especially for the gliders. The next thing to do after your glider license that people love to do is to get their familiarization rating. So that way they can fly with passengers. Well, that takes 10 hours of pilot and command time. So to get that 10 hours of pilot and command time, you need to be able to log your flights so that you know that you're doing it. Not only do you need it to get the cool things like a job or like a familiar rating for the glider or like a night rating or to be able to take passengers, whatever, it's also a legal requirement to do so under the CARS. Therefore, you must. CAR 401.08. Every student pilot must keep an up-to-date personal logbook in order to keep track of experience and recency. That's a must. So we need to record that. We need to record our experience to make sure that we are we're current, we're recent, and so that we know how much we've flown. We need to make sure that we're recording it properly. There's two types of time that we record in Canada and in most places in the world. It's flight time and it's air time. The flight time is the one that you and I care about the most as pilots because that's the one that shows our experience. Legally speaking, when we're logging flight time, we are logging the total time from the moment an aircraft first moves under its own power for the purpose of taking off until the moment it comes to a rest at the end of the flight. Once again, similar to the 30 minutes before and after thing, there's approximations that are not technically correct and that will not get you the correct answer on a test, but you'll hear people use interchangeably. So some people will say, oh, flight time is engine off. Actually, from the moment you turn the key, that's actually not legally what it is. Legally, it's from when the aircraft first moves under its own power to the moment when it comes, for the purpose of taking off, to the moment it comes to a rest. But engine on, engine off, it's close enough-ish for most people, most of the time, just not when you're writing a test. Flight time is what you're putting in your personal log. Personal log, by the way, there's all sorts of different types of personal logs. Some people will have like a fifth. Oh, you're so lucky. I've got it right here on my desk. Maybe I'll stop the share because then it'll show my camera bigger for you here. In the Air Cadet program, we have these beautiful logbooks here. This is my glider pilot's logbook. I got this one. This actually might be my original. This is my original one. This is showing all the different times. Every line that you enter is a different flight. So in that flights, then it's showing the number of flights that I've done, the date that that flight was on, the type of aircraft, the registration, the airport, and most importantly over here, if I can line my camera up properly, is the amount of time that that aircraft was flying for. Now you might be asking yourself, but sir, but Captain Auger, a glider can't operate under its own power, and you'd be 100% correct. Which is why we just use airtime instead. Airtime, what is airtime? Well, airtime is from when the aircraft leaves the surface to the time it touches down. You'll hear people say wheels up to wheels down. This is most important for maintaining technical records and journey logs and whatnot. It's most important for maintenance. When an aircraft's taxiing around doing 5 miles an hour on the ground, we're not too concerned. But what we are more concerned about is when we're operating that aircraft for maintenance purposes when it's up in the air, because that's when you're putting the most stress on the airframe. It's when you're operating the aircraft to its capacity. So that's where that's where we're looking for that for. So flight time, air time, those are the differences between the two. Great definitions to have down. I put the presentation back on there, but thank you, Cadet C. Sai. You didn't just want to look at me for the rest of the class? Ah, yes, okay. This is exactly what we talked about. So if you listened to me, then you don't have to read it. But personal log shall, once again, that operative word, contain the pilot's name, and for each flight, all of these different things here. For gliders, you'll see especially it needs the method of launch used for the flight. For aeroplanes, we need to mark the place of departure, the place of arrival, and all intermediate takeoffs and landings. Never make an entry in a personal log unless it is your log or the owner has given you permission to do so. Ah, look at that. There's a great example of a logbook from a very experienced pilot who flew out of Saint-Jean Airport, who's got 1,127 flights as of this line here, 1137 by the bottom. This particular flight in the year of 2004 was done on the 6th day of the 7th month, the 6th of July, in a Schweitzer 233 glider. Here's the registration, the airport, the launch type, the altitude that they reach, which is not a legal requirement. It's just a cool thing to write down. The place that they landed, and this particular one was a 4 or maybe a 19-minute instructional flight there. They've marked the student and the air lesson as well that happened with. For another example here, this is an aeroplane logbook. So this one was a glider log. This is an airplane log. You'll see similar things in here: the year, the date, the type of aircraft. This is an O1. It's a Super Dog actually. The registration of it, the pilot in command, and the student or passenger, the route that they took, and the amount of time right there. Very exciting stuff. It might have been a bird dog. I'm not sure. Anyways. Okay, moving on to our next changing point here. ATC clearances and instructions. So if air traffic control can effectively give you two things to follow, if you will, other than when they're just saying, how's your day, how's the weather? But when they're telling you something to do, it will be in two different ways. It'll either be through a clearance or through an instruction. And it's important to know the difference between the two, because if you're told one, you need to be able to you need to know which one you're being told. So a clearance. I'm sure if you've listened to any live ATC or something like that, you will have heard them say cleared to land, cleared to take off, or something of the following. A clearance is an authorization. It's not an instruction. It's not something that you must do. It is them saying, you are allowed to do this. You are cleared to land. You are allowed to land. They're giving you that authorization. However, once you say, okay, I'm cleared to land, I'll do it, then you must do it unless you tell them otherwise. So you'll see it's an authorization to proceed within controlled airspace, of course, because they're clearing you to do something under their own controlled airspace. But then once you accept it, then it becomes a shall, not a should. However, an instruction is a directive. So unless it's unsafe to do so, you shall comply with an instruction. Turn left to this heading. Climb to 2,000 feet. I don't know, state your intentions, something like that. They will give you an instruction and you must follow that unless it's unsafe to do so. Any questions? I'll take any boo. Stuff. Move on to visual light signals. Really cool stuff. So this is one of those ones. There's always a test question. It's always a test question on visual light signals because it's just one of those ones that's really easy to make a question out of, and you're always going to forget, and you're always going to second guess yourself. So they love to make exam questions about this. When an ATC tower is unable to communicate by radio to an aircraft, either give visual light signals to the aircraft to provide clearances and instructions visually. There is actual procedures in place so that the ATC, they have literally a light gun and they will shoot the light at your aircraft. So you'll look towards the tower, you'll see a green, a red, a white light, and you'll be able to communicate with them via light. You can also, and I've done this myself, you can call them on the cell phone. So nowadays we're modern enough that you can use your cell phone. You can call the air traffic control unit, and you can get a clearance or an instruction that way from them. So you don't necessarily have to use the light signals. However, break glass in case of emergency. The lights, every ATC unit, they're going to have a lights gun in the tower, and they'll be able to provide clearances and instructions to you that way. Once upon a time, I was flying actually in the tow plane in the eastern region out of Saint-Jean-Pont-Mont. We have the Super Dog, it's called. I found out later on, of course I didn't know at the time, but the switch which allows power to flow to the radio and to the transponder had failed. And so as it failed, like over the course of 10 minutes or so, the radio got less and less and less power until finally it had no more power and I had lost my radio. So I looked down, I saw I didn't have the radio. I was close-ish to the control tower's zone, but I wasn't quite inside the zone. I was one airport over. But I knew it was safest to go into the control zone because they'd be able to clear other traffic out of my way. And since I didn't have a radio, I didn't have a way to communicate with the other airplanes, so they'd be able to help me out and do that for me. So I was outside of the zone. I knew I couldn't go into their zone without a clearance. So I picked up the phone. Thankfully, my headset had Bluetooth, so it was easier than trying to hold the phone up and fly. But called the tower, explained what was going on. I said, "Hey, sir, I have no radio. I need to get in and land. Could you please help me out?" With a cherry on top. And they, once again, NAVCAN being the fantastic organization that they are, and Saint Jean Tower, credit to them for taking everything in stride. They said, "Yep, no problem whatsoever." Got me my clearance over the phone, let me land, took my information and whatnot, and off we went. I think within 20 minutes, I hopped into another airplane and got back out of there. So it was a good day overall. But yeah, they're good for that. Had I not had a cell phone and I needed to land at that airport, they could have given me light signals. If you see flashing green lights, it means clear to taxi. A steady green light, clear for takeoff. These are on the ground, by the way. These are the signals they can give you on the ground. These are available online. They're fairly international, I want to say. It's an ICAO standard, International Civil Aviation Organization standard. So most countries around the world are going to use these. They have other ones too for if you're in the air. They can give you these different light signals as well. Now, no, I have not seen the firing of a red pyrotechnical light. That's unfortunately only at a military control tower, and I don't think they do it on request. So it's question time. What does VFR mean? Gabba, lightning fast with the hand. Lyndon Agaba. It's me. Am I not able to? No, I think I can hear. No, my speaker's working. Sorry, Agaba. We can move on to C, Sai.
Visual flight rules. So you basically fly with while looking at the ground, basically.
Yeah, fly with the visual reference to the ground. Absolutely. How do I say your last name? Sorry, before I screw it up for the millionth time.
It's like the letter C.
Like the letter C. I love it. That's perfect. Very good. Thank you for everybody. I will. I used to have a button where I could like lower everyone's hand at once, but it's gone now. There it is. Next question. What is a ceiling? Agama, we can try you again, but I don't know if you're if it's gonna work. If not,
Hello?
you'll have to join the crowd in the. Oh, yeah, that's promising.
Hey.
Go ahead.
Is it how high visual firewalls you can fly?
Absolutely. Bonus points if you can tell me how they define it.
When it's 50% cloud cover, I think.
That's one of them. So over 50% cloud cover in the
Over
sky. So
50%.
yeah, a broken or an overcast layer is the technical term. So yep, that's absolutely it. And there's one other like fringe case. There's one other way where you could have a ceiling, but not necessarily have cloud to get it there. The Cameron Brinkers have it 100% right. Duell might know. Maybe Gallagher.
Can I answer?
Yeah, for sure.
So you said like another like condition other than like clouds, like lots of clouds, cloud cover. Is it like smoke, fog, or like snow? Like whichever is
Yeah.
lowest.
It's 100% that. Do you remember the term?
Oh man. I don't know.
That's okay. You're 100% right. It's exactly that. Like smoke, fog, mist, whatever. Vertical visibility is what they call that. So it's either cloud cover more than 50% of the sky. So like your fog, your smoke. Sorry, like your broken or your overcast layers, or you're going to be restricted by vertical visibility, which is your smoke, your snow, your fog. Sprute, comma, Abigail got that 100% right there, and got a fish emoji to show that you got it right. I'm not sure. Next one. What is airtime? Daddy.
Did you say I can answer?
Yeah, please do.
Like when the aircraft leaves the surface till it touches back on the ground.
Absolutely, yeah, 100% right. Airtime, wheels up to wheels down, when it leaves the surface to when it goes back down, and it's used mainly for aircraft technical logs, journey logs, maintenance tracking, that sort of thing. Bonus points to Joel and Cook in the chat. No fish for you by the looks of it, but you did get the answer. What is an ATC instruction? Go to, let's see. Sunil Kumar. I don't think I've heard from you yet.
So it's a direction given by ATC and the pilot shall comply.
Very good. Absolutely. You shall do it. It's a directive. It's issued for by ATC for ATC purpose. And unless it's unsafe, you must do it. And finally, what does a flashing green light indicate on the ground and in the air? Well, let's see here. I wasn't watching close enough. Let's go with Cook. Cook, you do you know the answer? I put it in the chat there. Yeah. You're cleared to yeah. You have it correct for the ground there. It's returning to landing. Yeah. I suppose that's me misspeaking there. In the air, it's returning to landing. But for the ground, Alicia, do you know for the ground?
Yes. So for when you're in the air, the flashing green light is return to landing. On the ground, flashing means you are cleared to taxi.
Cleared to taxi, 100% right. Yep. Somebody put cleared for takeoff. Cleared for takeoff is not the flashing green light. That's the steady green light. Flashing green light, 100% right, Mr. Oleshuk. Very good. This concludes this deck. 2 for 3. We're doing quite well this evening. Very excited about it. Well, I'm still Captain Joseph Auger. We're gonna get going. Here's what we're going to be learning about this evening. There's 10 points, but they're all relatively short, so it shouldn't take us too long to get through. We're going to talk license validity, the privileges of a pilot's license, what with a pilot's license you are allowed to do. We're going to talk about requests for production of documents. Sounds official. Inspections after normal occurrence, abnormal occurrences, requirements to keep tech records in general, journey log requirements, when you need to have it on board. We're going to talk about liability insurance, and we're going to talk about documents required to be carried on board. Still with me? There we go. Okay. So we'll start out with the license validity here. So this is, oh, good point. It's not visible. My apologies. Thanks for letting me know. We'll start again. 4103, licensing and documentation. I'm Captain Joseph Auger. We're going to get going. Here's the MTPs if you're all interested. Start with license validity. Here we are. So lots of cool stuff here. I think it's really interesting to see what you're allowed to do with a license in Canada. It's lots of information like when you have this license, you are allowed to operate an aircraft in Canada. Be the glider license, you're allowed to operate a glider, and with a private pilot's license, you can operate a glider, powered airplane, I should say. You need a couple of things. Like you can't act as aircrew unless you have the four things like it mentions here. You need to hold the appropriate permit, license, or rating to do the thing you want to do. You need it to be valid. You need to have a valid medical certificate, and you need to be able to produce it. I'll also preface by saying I'm restricting myself to legal requirements, and what you'll be tested on the entrance exam are the CARs, like the legal requirements for documentation. Operators can set their own rules, basically. So when it comes to the Air Cadet program, for instance, we will put additional restrictions on this. Not only do you need to hold the appropriate license and whatnot, but we do a day check, so we will make sure that you are valid to teach to operate that aircraft. Various different things like that. Recency requirements. So in Canada, not only do you need to have the license needs to be valid, the medical needs to be valid and whatnot, you also need to be recent, according to this car right here, 401.05, paragraph 1, paragraph 2. So you need to have completed one of the following things, well, a bit more than that. You need to have completed these things in the last little bit. So one of the following two, you need to have acted as a pilot in command or a co-pilot of an aircraft within the last 5 years. That's what keeps your license recent. And you need to have either that, or you, if you've surpassed that, then you do a flight review with an instructor in the last 12 months and have certified your logbook's good to go for that. And you need to have done a recurrent training program within the last 2 years. Transport Canada is very allowing for these sorts of things. A recurrent training program. Some people will do an online seminar. Some people will do a class. Quite oftentimes, where I am, the flying clubs will host classes that will qualify as a recency. So it'll check off that 2-year box for you. But you can also get a new license, a new rating. You can renew a rating. You can do all sorts of different things that will count towards your 2-year recency requirement. In order to carry passengers, you need to have done one of these two things. If you're in a powered aircraft, it's at least 5 takeoff and landings in the same category and class of aircraft. Or for a glider pilot, you need to have done 2 takeoffs and 2 landings in a glider with an instructor on board and obtain certification of competence to carry passengers for that launch type. So additional information on that, like the category and class, that's like if you're flying someone in a Cessna 172, you need to have done those takeoff and landings in that or another like single engine non-high performance airplane within the last 6 months. You need to have done those 5 takeoff and landings. Most all gliders are considered the same category. You could have done those flights in any glider. But of course, you'll either do those 5 takeoffs and landings, or you'll do, if you're a glider pilot, the 2 takeoffs, 2 landings in the glider. We have medical requirements as well. Before we go further, is there anybody in here who has not gotten their medical yet? This may be the most valuable thing that we do tonight. Oh boy, it's a lot of you. I got 11 hands, 13 hands up so far. Allow me. Transport Canada, in their infinite wisdom, they are relatively slow in getting your medical certificate out to you. So it's up to you. But I would not leave this until the last minute. You need to have your medical in like to your squadron before the deadline, because the squadron has to submit it through their own chain of command by, if I recall correctly, it's May 16th this year. It's somewhere around there. You need to have that medical done, because if like what they'll do is you'll get the course sometime in April. I think the course comes out. You'll get it then, and then if you don't have the medical in by time, they'll take the course away and they'll give it to somebody else who does. There you go, May 16th. So Transport Canada here, I'll show you right now. TCCME. It needs to be through a civil aviation medical examiner. The Transport Canada website, they have a little search tool here, and I'll put this link in the chat. You can search for these specific doctors in your city who can do that task. So I'll put the civil aviation medical examiner search. I'll put that link right there for you right here. You need to get a category 1 or a category 3 medical from one of these doctors. It doesn't make a huge difference between the two. If you have the intention of doing commercial pilot training in the future, you can get a 1. If you don't, then a 3 is fine as well. The requirements are a little bit less stringent for a 3. But at the end of the day, you need to get either a 1 or a 3. Yes, legally speaking, you can get a category 4 for the gliders, but in the Air Cadet program, we require you to have a 1 or a 3. So you can go into here, you can, I don't know, somebody put Winnipeg in the chat and I ignored it earlier, so we'll look at Winnipeg this time. You can look up by city, you can look up the different doctors in your city that will offer that. Looks like there's 4 in Winnipeg who will offer that service. With their phone number, you can click, it'll give you all sorts of information on them right there. It is essential to get this done because once you've done that exam, the medical is valid for 5 years after you do the exam for your age. But it takes time on the initial medical for Transport Canada to receive all the documentation, to process it, and then send you the certificate. So you need to be able to get that in time from there. If you don't get your medical in time, they will take away the course and give it to somebody who does their medical. There's 6 hands up. Are there 6 questions, or is it just in response to my who doesn't have a medical? Ajadi, you put your hand up.
When I went to get my license last year on the website, I think sometime I don't know if they've updated it now, but like some of the doctors weren't actually still on there, like updated and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, that sounds about right. Yep. Yeah, like at the end of the day, if the doctor retires, if the doctor's no longer doing that service, it's a private service. Like most of these doctors are doing it as a business, as like a thing that they do for the Canadian public. So they don't all do it all of the time. In Ottawa, for instance, like where I'm from, one of the doctors is a line pilot. He used to work for Sunwing. He works for Flair now, I think. So he flies, and then when he comes back from flying, then he'll open up some appointments, and we'll do it that way too. So they're not all going to be open 24/7 for you to do these medical appointments. There's a cost to them as well. I don't know how it is in every city in Canada. In Ottawa, they're getting a bit pricey. I think I paid 230 for my last one, but they're valid for 5 years. And if you do one year, like say you get glider this year, it's valid for power for the next year too, because you're within that 5 years. Yeah, it's a cost of doing business. If the cost is prohibitive, I know a lot of squadrons will offer assistance to get the medical done. So reach out to your squadron staff with relation to that. Jaddy still has your hand up. Do you have another question?
No, sorry.
Okay, no worries. Brinkhurst had a hand up, but the hand went down. I'm assuming you don't have the question anymore. If you do, let me know. Is there a different CAT number you need for powered compared to glider? In the Air Cadet program, for either power or for glider, you need to get a category 1 or a category 3. That category will do you well for both the glider and for the power application. The 1, if you have interest in the future to become a commercial pilot, you can get the 1 early. It's not necessary, it doesn't matter. But it will just it would just save you maybe a little bit of time into the future. It doesn't matter. But you have to do a 1 or a 3. If a doctor here, they'll say, oh, you're applying to become a glider pilot. Well, you know a glider pilot just needs a category 4, and you have to stop them. You say, not in the Air Cadet program. The Air Cadet program requires a 1 or a 3. We do not do 4s. Anyways. So that's my spiel on that. And while we're on a tangent, because I'm the type of guy who does tangents, This document right here, you'll love this document. Details the Air Cadet National Training Selection process for the glider and for the power course and for international exchange, but we're going to focus on glider and power. In here, I already talked about the deadlines a little bit. They have that in here. You'll see the timelines is Annex D. So that medical that you need to have in, you'll see like the virtual merit interviews are done here. The selections are announced first Friday in April. They get announced to the squadrons. I'm here. It says first Monday in June, but it's wrong. You have to submit your category 3 medical by the 16th of May this year, and it needs to be sent to your squadron. Your squadron needs to send it up. So that's in the timeline document there. There's some other really useful things to know. The scoring factors is a really good one here too. I'll put the link to that in the chat, but this is how they do your file review is through this document here. It may get updated throughout the year, but that's the current standard. Anyways, back to the lesson. I've spoken long enough. We'll get back. Basically what I just said. You need to do a medical exam by a civil aviation medical examiner, CAME. Valid medical certificate is required to exercise the privileges of a license. So you might have done your flight test and your experience and your this and your that, and you might hold the license. But if you're not medically, if you don't have that medical certificate, you are not allowed to exercise the privileges of the license. On the exams, they're going to ask you some questions related to medical validity. This is also one of those ones that always shows up and you always need to know how to do it. It's fairly simple for private pilots and for glider pilots. Glider pilot, it's 60 months, no matter what. A private pilot, it's 60 months if you're less than 40 years old, and it's for 24 months, so 5 years or 2 years if you're 40 years old or older. So those are the two that you need to be looking for. And guaranteed, there's always going to be a question. It'll say something along the lines of, Cadet Bloggins got his medical done on June 15th of this year. When will their medical expire? It expires on the first of the month after you did the exam. So they all expire on the first of the month, either 60 months, so 5 years into the future, or if it's a private pilot over 40 years old, then it's 2 years into the future. Easy enough. So you say, okay, today's November 5th, 2024. I just got my medical done, and I'm under 40 years of age. So my medical is going to expire in 25, 6, 7, 8, 2029, December 1st. I should really click the slide ahead before I start talking. Exactly what we talked about right there. Do it on the 10th of December, 2024. Then, of course, it's January 1st, so it takes forward a year. And then 2025, so 26, 27, 28, 29, 2030. Limitations of your license. If you have the license, if you have the medical in your pocket, that's great. Keep in mind there's limitations to that. The medical certifies that unless something changes, you're medically fit to fly. But if something changes, you're not medically fit to fly. So if you have if you have an illness, an injury, or a disability, or you're taking a drug or receiving medical treatment or anything that could impair your ability to fly the aircraft, don't fly the airplane. Legally not allowed to do so. If you were involved in an aircraft accident, you also can't fly until you're cleared by a civil aviation medical examiner. And also, this is a rule that likes to come up on exams as well. If you're in your 30th week of pregnancy, all the way up until 6 weeks after you have given birth, you can't fly an airplane. Like I mentioned, if you were involved in an accident or after pregnancy, you also need to see a doctor, a civil aviation medical examiner, prior to you being able to fly again. Any questions? I know that's very technical stuff that we kind of breezed through. request for the production of documents. You know, like, well, maybe you don't know. You probably shouldn't know. It's best if you don't know. If you get pulled over in a car, they come up to the window and they rap on the window and they go license, registration, and insurance. They can do that. They can't really pull you over in the sky, but they can do that. Usually, you'll see them sometimes at airports. They'll do like ramp checks. So once you land and you taxi in, then you could see Transport Canada or a peace officer, an immigration officer, or a delegate of the minister is there, and they're doing ramp checks and they're asking pilots and flight attendants and air crew. They're asking them for their documents. Now, similar to a driver's license, anyone who's a holder of or in possession of a Canadian aviation document, technical record, or other document relating to an aircraft shall produce that document if you're requested by a peace officer, an immigration officer, or the minister. Okay. So somebody representing Transport Canada who has delegated authority, who has power from Transport Canada to ask for these documents, you have to give it over. And by the way, they literally do have badges. They literally will come up to your airplane and say, I'm a delegate of the Transport Canada, of the Minister of Transportation. I need to see your license. Inspections for abnormal occurrences. In aviation, we like to be very, very safe. If anything happens out of the normal, an inspection is required of the aircraft. Following an abnormal occurrence, you have to inspect it before it goes up for its next flight. If you don't have to disassemble something to look at it and make sure that it's okay, then the pilot in command can do it. However, if you have to take it apart, then a mechanic has to come and have a look at it. There's some examples. So yeah, overspeeds, heavier hard landings, prop strikes, flights into severe turbulence, something that happens that could have an adverse effect on the airworthiness of the aircraft requires an inspection. Simple as that. In the air connect program, for instance, this is just additional information. There's a stricter subset of rules in our national maintenance policy manual. We have regulations and procedures to follow for this. We follow the military flight safety program, so we actually put the aircraft into quarantine and have it inspected. We have to call people. We have to do various things like that. And the air connect gliding program, prohibited maneuvers is one of the abnormal occurrences that could occur. Another one for us is a unlocated FOD, so foreign object debris. Say you drop a pen or something into the airplane, that's considered an abnormal occurrence. And until you find that pen or until a mechanic signs off on that aircraft, that airplane's grounded until one of those two things happens. Somebody asked, what's a prop strike? Yeah, so Graphos has it 100% correct. Prop strikes object. It could be the ground. Sometimes it's like a snowbank, like a prop could hit a snowbank, or it could hit like a concrete barrier or something like that. Basically, if the prop touches anything that it shouldn't, since the prop is directly connected to the engine, you can cause some serious damage very, very quickly. So the second that there's a prop strike, it's game over. We're sending it in for inspection. Technical records. There's two different types of records that we maintain. Well, I guess three really, if you count your own personal log that we talked about. But there's a journey log that we keep with the airplane that's like all the trips and the maintenance history of that aircraft. But there's also technical logs, which are never kept with the airplane. And that is separately will document all the different maintenance instances and the airtime on that aircraft. The idea is in the case that the aircraft does crash and in like in the fire or whatnot, you lose the journey log. There's a maintenance history for that aircraft. This is a shall. This is something that the owner of an aircraft, the operator of an aircraft, shall keep these technical records, and you must keep them up to date and whatnot. For the aircraft, the technical records, I should say, it actually gets even more specific. You maintain one for the airframe, one for the variable pitch propeller, and one for each engine. separate records like that, because you can swap an engine out and that technical record follows the engine. We also need to maintain an empty weight and balance report so that we know that the aircraft was in balance. In the case of a balloon or a glider, all entries in respect of the technical record referred to in paragraphs above may be kept in the journaling logs. So we don't have to do a technical record for the aircraft. So in the Canadian aviation regulations, in the CARS, it states that every person who makes an entry into a technical record shall make it accurate, legible, and in a permanent manner. And you have to write your name and sign and date the entry as well. Aircraft owner has the responsibility to protect these records to make sure that nothing happens to them. When you start a new technical logbook, you bring forward necessary entries in the old one so that it's obvious that like one leads to the other. You have to show some sort of cohesion between the two. If you need to make any alterations in the technical record, you don't scribble it out, you don't color over it, you don't do anything like that. You just put one line to strike through it, and this is to keep it legible. Just one line to strike through. You initial to show that you've done it, and then you put the correct entry, making sure that you sign it and mention why you're making that correction. Seems fairly simple. I think so. Ajadi.
Do you have to strike a line through with a ruler?
It's a good idea too. I'll show you exactly the reason why. Is because how did I do it? I had like the presentation view. Oh yeah, here it is. Here's how I did it. Because if you do this, if you do like that to strike over a line, it looks disastrous. And the big idea behind it as well is so that you can see that it's been stricken out, but you can still understand what's underneath it. So one line, pretend I use a ruler, one line across it out. Usually people will put their initials right next to it. And then underneath it, they'll put the new record. It needs to be done in a nice, clean fashion. Two cars that this refers to here, this like very specific laws. Actually, if ever you're interested, because I think your question was, is that really in the law? We can look up the law. Don't you love looking up laws in your free time in the evening? This particular law, and feel free to follow along if you like. I'll include a link to the laws down here. This particular law is 605/93. I can see on my slides here. That's going to be in part 6, the general operating and flight rules. 605, you'll see that is subpart 5, which is aircraft requirements. And underneath this one here, division 6 is technical records. We'll just wait for it to load. 605.93. Oops, there it is. Paragraph 4 and 5. This is what we just talked about, and this is literally in the law. Every person who brings into use a new volume of an existing technical record shall make the entries relating to the previous volume that are necessary to ensure that an unbroken chronological record is maintained. Then paragraph 5, which is making an alteration, shall do so by striking out the incorrect entry in such a manner that the underlying information remains legible. So you don't need to use a ruler, but like it's, you need to make sure that it's legible. And inserting the correct entry together with the date of the alteration, the reason for the alteration, if it's necessary to clarify, and the name and signature or employee identifier to show that it's done properly. Literally in the law. It's right there. Is there a link to this PowerPoint? Yep. It's the link was put way up in the chat. It's on the SharePoint. You can go into we're in 401, which is airlaw. You can go into 401. All the PowerPoints are there for this module. I can show you once we're done here. I can pull up the SharePoint and go from there. but we're almost there. Journey log. This is referencing these two cars, which relate to journey log requirements. So, like I mentioned, you need to have a journey log, which it's a detail of either every flight that the aircraft has done, or in certain scenarios, it's like every day that that aircraft has flown. You'll put a record in that will show what that aircraft has done for that day. So, no person shall make a single or a bulk entry into the journey log unless it's one pilot in command who's done the full series, or for instance, like on the cadet training centers, we just do one entry because we have a separate entry, the daily flight sheet, that has all of the different flights on it. You need to maintain these records for not less than 1 year. Most people just keep them forever, to be honest. And the daily flight record must be retained for at least 2 years. The journey log. Do you need to have the journey log on board? Do you need to have a record of every flight that that airplane has done on board? You'll hear all sorts of people giving all sorts of different answers to this question, and some of them right and some of them not so right. The law says, this is CAR 60595, you need to have the journey log on board unless you're not planning to land and shut down at anywhere else other than where you started. So people do like ridiculously long flights and stuff. They'll go 5 hours away or something, and so long as they do 5 hours back and land at the same spot, or at least they had planned to land back at the point of departure, they don't need to have the journey log on them. However, if you're doing a flight and you're planning on going somewhere else, stopping for lunch, stop for gas, whatever, you need to have the journey log on board. You'll see that the gliders, they oftentimes don't have the journey log on board because we'll stay close enough to the airport of origin that we'll land back where we were. If you don't intend to land somewhere else, then you don't take the journey log with you. I believe finally, in Canada, there's a requirement for liability insurance. So no aircraft owner shall operate an aircraft unless the owner has liability insurance covering risks of public liability. Same for a car. You don't need to insure yourself. You don't need to have insurance in the case that you have a crash to repair the car, to compensate you for the car itself. But you do need it for other people. You need it for liability. In case you do something that hurts somebody else, you need to be covered for that. And that's the same for aviation here. So you cannot operate that aircraft unless you have liability insurance on that. And consequently, you need to have that proof of insurance on board when you're operating the aircraft, which we'll talk about very shortly. We're going to go over the list of different documents. Surprise, we're doing it right now. There's an acronym for this. The following documents are required to be carried on board. It's AROW-GIL. R-O-W-J-I-L. I'm going to edit that message and add them in as we go. First one, certificate of airworthiness, and we'll get to a flight. We'll get to the descriptions of all of these in a second. Certificate of registration, the operator's manual. Mostly it's called the pilot operating handbook. The weight and balance, the aircraft journey log. In most cases, we talked about the exceptions already. Insurance, proof of insurance, and your aircrew licenses, which is your radio officer operator certificate, your medical, your pilot's license, anything that you need to prove that you are legally allowed to operate that aircraft. I guess we don't go into too much detail. I guess I'll do the detail for you. The certificate of airworthiness here. This is a document that proves that if you operate this aircraft in the right way, you are allowed to fly that aircraft. So it shows that that airplane has been certified as being safe to operate in Canada. It's a document that is produced by Transport Canada. They'll send it to you and they'll say, yes, this specific register, like this exact serial number of aircraft is able to operate in these different ways. Registration shows who that aircraft is being operated by. Similar to a car where you'll register it to a person. Similar idea. Pilot Operating Handbook is the manual that will explain the emergencies, the normal procedures, the limitations, the performance of the aircraft. It's the manual on how that airplane works. You need to have a copy of that on board. Weight and balance. So if you add new instruments or you do any sort of things to an aircraft, a mechanic will sign off to show that the weight and balance has changed, the empty weight and balance. You need to have proof of that on board. The aircraft journey log. In most cases, like we talked about, you need to have that on board if you're planning to land and shut down somewhere else. Proof of insurance, like we talked about, and you need to have your licenses on you. Aerogel. Oftentimes, you'll see this in the context of like they'll show you a whole bunch of different documents, and then they'll say, well, example 1 has these 5 documents. Are those all legally required? And example 2 will have a couple more, and you'll have to do kind of the odd one out searching to make sure that you have the right one. Weight and balance, journey log, insurance. Then finally, licenses. There we go. Our final question period of the night. What are the recency requirements to carry passengers? Gallagher.
So within the last 6 months of like carrying passengers, you had on power, you have to have 5 takeoffs or landings, and for glider, 2 takeoffs and landings with an instructor.
Yes, it's the glider is actually it's an or in like you can do the 5 takeoffs and landings in a glider, that counts, or you can do 2 flights with an instructor. Yeah, 100% right. Who has authority to require you to produce a pilot license? Oh yeah.
The people with the fancy badges are the minister, a peace officer, and a delegate of the minister. Is that correct?
I got 2 of the 3, but I love the way that you put that because I've never heard that before. So you get all the points for trying. 100 points.
Thank you.
Duel puts it 100% correctly in the chat there. In the way of the law, the way that it's written, it's like the minister has this authority because the minister at the top of the food chain has all of the authorities, and then the minister will delegate their authorities down to the various different people who need to have that authority. Basically, it's like your parents have the power to, like, they own the house, they own the cars, they own everything like that, and then as you get older, that they can delegate you the authority to drive the car. They can delegate you the authority to mow the lawn, like a similar idea like that. And the one that Joel had and you missed there was an immigration officer. You'll see it quite often, like if you take a private airplane and you fly yourself down to the States, when you get stopped by customs, because at your first point of landing, you have to meet customs, you have to show them your passport. They'll also ask for your license to see that you're legally allowed to operate that. So an immigration officer, like a border agent, whatnot, they have the authority. Transport Canada is that this really doesn't matter, but at the parliamentary level, the prime minister picks their cabinet, and within their cabinet, they have different ministers that they assign for things. So the prime minister assigns somebody to be the minister of transport, who then has those powers. Underneath the minister is the deputy minister, who runs the department to uphold those laws. So The Aeronautics Act, in order to make sure that the Aeronautics Act is upheld, Transport Canada was created, and they action that that law to make sure that people can still do what they need to do. And underneath Transport Canada, the minister will delegate to a whole bunch of people within Transport Canada different powers. This isn't a politics lesson, but that's how it works. Give an example of an abnormal occurrence that would require an inspection. Konya, I'm so happy that you're chiming in at the end of the night. It's great to see you there. But I did just go to you there, so I'll go to C because I haven't heard from you in a while.
Overspeeds, heavy landings or hard landings, propeller strikes from birds, I think the ground, and turbulence?
Oh,
Or
the
heavy
severe turbulence, yeah.
Severe
Yeah.
turbulence, yeah.
Yep, memorized? There's no way. I'm very impressed. Conley, you have any others?
Sorry, I might have accidentally missed what they said, but wasn't it anything that like could exceed any of your maximums on your aircraft? So if you're going too fast, wouldn't you have to do an inspection as well?
Yeah, I like the way you put it. If you exceed a limitation, for sure. Yeah, great one. Overspeeding or extending the flaps too fast or taking off when you're too heavy or what. Yeah, absolutely. Any limitation, for sure. When can you use? That's a mean one. When can you use a single entry in an aircraft journey logbook to represent a series of flights? There's 2 cases when you can do this. Conley.
I'm pretty sure one of the cases is if you are the pilot in command and you're the one who is, you know, main pilot in command for all the flights.
Absolutely, 100% correct. Succession of flights with the same pilot in command. And Ajay, did you happen to have the other one? Tough one, I know. It's basically when you have the authority to do a oh, Ajay, do you know? The hand goes up and down, but I don't blame you. It's a tough one. So when you have the when you're allowed to use a daily flight record, then you can just do one entry that basically references that daily flight record, shows all of the flights in that. As an aside, like I work at a flight training unit, so we have this software right here, for instance. So what we would do is we would put one entry in the journey log that just shows like, okay, today on November 5th, this total amount of time was put onto the airplanes. But then we have software that maintains a daily flight record. I'll show you the software real quick right now, if it loads. On the CTC as well, they'll have software that will track all the flights. Because if not, like at the end of the day, you're going to be sitting there putting the 60 different little glider flights that glider did in the journey log. So instead, software takes care of that. It generates a daily flight record. And then once that record is set up, then you can just go to then in the journey log, you just do one line to say this is everything that happened that day. So Joel, yes, one for every day that the plane flew. Yeah, if you're using a daily flight record, you're going to put one entry in the journey log in that big book that shows all of the history of that aircraft, just one record for all the flights for that day. But the only other time you can do that is if it's the same pilot in command for the string of flights. Most of the time, you're doing one entry per flight, unless one of those 2 exceptions applies. When are you not required to carry the journal log? I do know. Emma.
Me?
I'm sorry to hear you having mic issues there.
Answer?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, okay. If you're like, it's like you're returning to the same place where you came from. Not, yeah.
Yeah, you've got the similar idea as Duel in the chat. Cook has a similar idea as well, and it's like you're in the right ballpark, but it's not quite correct. Cook, I think, was next to have the hand up. Do you know the rule? It's a tough one, I know. Olashuk had his hand up as well.
I believe the answer. You are not required to carry your journey log on the aircraft when you have plans to return to the same aerodrome or airspace that you originally took off from.
It's true, but there's like a key piece of the wording that all three of you have missed. Like you're all close to the bullseye, but not quite on it. Spruce? Like new names. Or perhaps Zografo.
Zographos.
Bravos.
When you intend to go back.
Yeah, you're all close but not quite it. It's when you don't intend to shut down. So you can actually land somewhere else, but as long as you don't shut down the airplane and then you take off again and then you come back, you're good to go. You don't have to have the journey log. You need to have the intention, or you need to not, I should say, have the intention to land and shut down somewhere else. Then you're good to not take the journey log with you. But if you do, like if you plan to land and shut down somewhere else, you got to take the journey log with you. It's a weird one, I know. That's all I had. I see that there's two hands up. Sargaphos, do you have anything to add? Or Conley?
No, I just did that by itself.
Yeah, I think somebody else is removing the hands. Yeah, Conley?
Yeah, sorry, that's me. My question for that, sir, was if you touch down, wouldn't that mean that you're starting like a new flight time?
It's a very good point. Oh, is it in this deck or was it in the other deck? I think it was a few decks back, the
Yeah,
definition of flight time.
it was mentioned a while ago where it's like if as soon as like flight time is is gauged by the moment the wheels of your plane are on the ground and are in the air.
Yeah. Did I not save it properly? Here it is. Is that like that? Oh, that's close. Close enough. Flight time until the moment it comes to rest at like its final point, like when the flight is completely over. So you can actually like so you take off and your first movement towards taking off and whatnot. So you start your flight time, you take off, you fly Winnipeg to Edmonton, you land in Edmonton, you come to a complete stop, but you don't stop the engine. You go off, take off again, come all the way back to Winnipeg, land, and then you shut down. That is a flight from Winnipeg to Winnipeg. So it's from the moment that it first moves on its own power for the purpose of takeoff until the moment that it comes to rest at the very end of the flight. It counts as flight time. So you can actually log that as one line despite landing at another airport in the middle of it. You just never shut down the engine, so that's still one flight.
Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, no problem. It's a very good point. I tell him that to Red Bull. Yeah. You heard the two pilots lost their license for that? Excellent. Total time the aircraft moves its own way. Oh, perfect. Yep. Until it comes to complete rest at the end of the flight. That's doable. You got the definition 100% right there. Excellent. This is all I've had for this evening. That's the three classes that we had to cover. Are there any final questions before we get going? Look, at the end of the day, if ever you have any questions or anything like that, well, first of all, I'll stay until you're all left. I'll answer as many questions as you like. But if ever you think of anything else that you want to have answered, I love talking aviation. You can send me an email. I'll put my email in the chat there. I fly for the program. I fly on outside of the program. Like it's what I love to do. So I'm more than happy to answer your question on that. Outside of that point, thank you very much. I truly enjoyed my evening. If you all go and you get your medicals done and get great grades because you've studied your stuff well and move on to the entrance exam and succeed there, then I'll be a happy camper. So thank you very much for your time this evening, and have a great rest of your night. I'll respond to the questions that I receive and bid you adieu. What do they count as shutting down, like engine shutdown or full shutdown? It's a great question, and it's one with nuance. In private aviation, so part 6 of the cars, it is you shut down the engine. So the engine comes to a stop. That's considered engine shutdown for the flight. It depends where you are. Like in commercial aviation, there's different rules. They'll use like blocks off to blocks on. So it's from the time that they release the brakes to the time that they put their brakes on. If you get that approved under your operating certificate, then that's what you're allowed to do. So airlines will oftentimes use from the time that they take their brakes off and start the pushback to the time that they're back in the gate with the gates on, with the brakes on. That's what they'll use for flight time. But commercial aviation is a little bit different because they can get their own rules approved, and so long as Transport Canada says, yeah, that's good, then they're good to do that. For everyone else, for us who operate under Part 6 of the cars, private operating, it's that definition that I showed you earlier. First moves under the under its own power for the purpose of takeoff to the moment it comes to its last rest. I'll check as a question.
Hello. I would just like to clarify something that was said in the intro. There will be other classes that are going on this week. However, they will be going off the same material that has been reviewed this class, correct?
They won't be as good as me. Yes. So it runs Sunday to Saturday. So there's a whole bunch of different classes throughout the week from Sunday to Saturday, but they'll all cover the same 4 lessons that we did this evening. Then next Sunday, it's the same schedule, the same timings for it, and using the same meeting links in each of the channels, but now it's the new material. So 1 week, 1 subset of material, 10-week program with a break for the holidays in the middle.
Thank you very much, sir.
No problem. I got it right, I think, one time, but I'll try again. Tell Yatikov.
Yeah, pretty good. So where would we be able to find the PowerPoints used for the lessons today?
I did promise you that, didn't I? I'll just put the link directly into it. This is like the main National Ground School Program SharePoint. You'll see they put the different time zones on the side. There's a link to each of the teams. So this is the team that we're in right now. There's also that team where you can ask like general pilot questions to whoever you like. It's kind of a free for all here. And there's also various different information. We just learned about airlaw. So if you click on here, it's going to go to a SharePoint site with all the different classes. Here's like the 3 classes that we just did. You can open up the folders and they'll have the information in there right there. You can look through that. You'll see it's in French, it's in English. It's set up quite nicely in there. So it's here. It's on this digital campus website link through the SharePoint. And I'll put the link in the chat right now.
Thank you very much.
I think that answers, no problem at all. I think that answers Ibbotson's question. Brown said, do all different classes have the same PowerPoint? Yeah, for the most part, like we're all using the same base. I added a couple of pictures and a couple of things here and there, but yeah, we're all using the same PowerPoints. Because of your cadet night tomorrow, the next classes are going to be on the main SharePoint. Yeah, so Cook, like you saw before, in the team, you can look through the calendar. There's classes going on all the time. I'll see if I can. Oh yeah, perfect. Depending on what time zone you're in, I'll just open up Central Standard Time. But you can see like There's classes Sunday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday. So there's tons of classes going on throughout the week. It's recommend that you do one a week because then you'll get the material fresh each week that we're running this. But like if you want to go on tomorrow or the next night, feel free. You can attend as many or as few classes as you like. It's totally up to you for that. But it's the same material per week. So Sunday to Saturday is going to be the same material. That's going to be taught at all of these different times. The 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. Yeah, easy as that. So if you have a cadet night, don't worry, skip that meeting, just attend one per week and you'll be golden. I think I've answered Jules' question as well. Same material. Easy. No problem at all. Have a good evening, Mr. Good. Hey, Gritton, you're good to leave. Yeah. Thanks for attending. Appreciate it. For all, Jewel, Cook, have a good evening. Take care. It's Conley, how can I help you?
Hi, actually, I had a bit of a question because I was rereading my notes about like pilot license limitations. And this is kind of just like, what if you had, let's say, color blindness? How would that affect, your flying or ability to get a license?
It's a great question. It actually doesn't. So for the most part, like and I'll preface this chat by saying I am not a doctor, so speak with a doctor if in the case that this applies to you. But color blindness most of the time will not limit you. I know a lot of pilots who do have color blindness. What it might limit you is into the future. You may not. They might put a limitation that says day only. So within the cadet program, that's totally fine because both the glider and the power program that we run, both of them are day only anyways. So it's not really going to restrict you.
Right.
However, if you're thinking of commercial flight training, if you're thinking of being a commercial pilot in the future, it may limit you from some jobs. What'll happen is when you first go for your medical, and probably a lot of the times after when you renew your medical, they'll do one more test for you. During the medical, I'm sure you've done it before, but they open the book and it's got the numbers in the different colors. And you have to read
Yeah.
through the book and make sure that you get yeah. So they'll do that. If you fail that, or if you declare that you have color blindness, they'll probably send you to a specialist, and the specialist will assess you for colorblind. Or if you already are colorblind, then I'm sure it'll be a moot point. And essentially Transport Canada will decide what they do from you from there. Not to say that there's no future in aviation for that. There's tons of flying jobs that you don't need to fly at night for. And even the ones that do, depending on the severity of the color blindness and depending on the type of color blindness, it could be that it doesn't restrict you at all. But that'll be up to the civil aviation medical examiner.
Cool. Thank you. I guess I mean I don't have color blindness, but I don't know. It was just a thought that popped up in my head.
Oh,
But
yeah,
thank
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, no problem at all. I guess like because we were talking about the light signals earlier, and that
Yeah,
would
because I was
maybe
like,
be a bit more.
I wouldn't know if someone who is colorblind would like be able to recognize it, or if it's because if you've been colorblind your entire life, you just know what it's supposed to look like. So I always find that interesting.
I think so, yeah. But I think that they see it as a larger risk at night because at nights then it's that there's so fewer references that you're looking for that like the color of the light that's shining at you is so important that I've heard, at least I know people who have been restricted today only for that reason.
Nice. Okay. I mean, that's not nice, but like, thank you so much for answering my questions.
Yeah, no problem at all.
Yeah, I hope you have a really great evening, sir.
You too. Take care.
Okay, take care.